to Clarinet Stories. I'm your host, Maryse Legault, and today I'm very pleased to present you a comprehensive interview with my former teacher and legendary historical clarinetist, Eric Hoeprich. Eric was one of the first musicians to perform and record on historical clarinets. He is an instrument builder and he is also a praised researcher. He is the author of the most comprehensive book about the history of the clarinet published at Yale University Press. Eric is a central figure of the historical clarinet culture and of the historically informed performance movement in general. Go get yourself a coffee and a notepad because we have a long way to go. This interview is packed with information and food for thought. Eric even squeezes in a few suggestions for reads. I hope you will enjoy, and thanks for watching.
Okay, we're live.
Right.
So, hi Eric. How has the past year gone for you?
Well, I think like most people, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. There've been the good thing about having some time off, which we all dream of so much of the time. We did get the time off, but maybe a little bit too much. It was often hard to structure the time and feel like I was using it well, and that led to some frustration at times as well. Just the sort of the sense that so often life is the structure is provided by external sources, and just the feeling that no, you had to do everything yourself.
So did you have to adjust a lot?
Well, yeah.
In your
I mean,
life?
I did have some structure, and like many people, I did continue to teach, and I had never even tried teaching online before. So that was at first that was really very difficult. It was incredibly tiring. It was very unsatisfactory, and I think for both the students and for me. But after a little while, I really got used to it. I could filter. I mean, when the internet maybe wasn't so good, or when there were some interruptions or difficulties, I could filter and not have to stop the whole thing. But I just started to understand that there was a different kind of flow for the lessons and different kind of things we could work on. And I have to say that it kind of is a happy ending, because I had some master's students who gave recitals, and I went over to hear those, and they really played well. I mean, they had really profited from the year. They'd really the work that we had done, but of course on their own as well. They had done a great job, and so I felt like, well, it certainly wasn't lamentable, and it certainly wasn't worse than it might have been, actually. So
Yeah.
that was in a way kind of a happy ending.
That's nice. Yeah, we definitely had some. I mean, if you wanted it, you got a lot of quality time with your instruments in the past year. So that's, I think, something very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would really like to talk about your musical journey. Like, this is something that I'm very interested in. I was wondering, when did you first learn how to play the clarinet?
Well, I enrolled in this public school system that they have in America for learning instruments. There was a guy named Mr. Cox, and he was like that cheesy musical, The Music Man. He played all the instruments. He'd done an education degree somewhere,
Nice.
and he could play everything. And so there were, like in our class, there were all the brass instruments, saxophone. One kid played saxophone for a while, and then he switched to bassoon because that's really what he wanted to do. And I was pretty mundane. I think I played sort of the recorder of legitimate instruments, which was the clarinet, and there were quite a few of us. And that my choice for the clarinet was partially because my father, who was not a professional musician, but had apparently played it when he was a kid because his father had played. So it was somehow a little bit preordained that would be a good choice for me.
I didn't know
there was
that.
no pressure at all. I just thought that, yeah, try the clarinet. And I thought, wow, I got a noise out of it right away, and I thought it was kind of fun playing the keys. I was very young. I think I was only 7.
Oh, wow.
And
On a B flat clarinet, you
Yeah, just the B
started?
flat clarinet. Yeah.
Wow, not even the E flat
No, not even starting with
journey.
something smaller. No, I mean it
Wow,
was
and
probably dreadful. Not probably. It was definitely dreadful. There's no question about it. But you start and you start
yeah,
making a sound and learning the fingerings and the reading music. I mean, all this stuff I learned at the same time, and it was kind of
yeah.
fascinating.
And
Um,
can you just remind me, where did you grow up? Like,
well,
where was that?
when I initially started, it was in Salt Lake City, Utah. My father was a doctor and a professor, so his first not his first, but his first sort of higher level professorship was at the University of Utah,
Okay.
at medical school. And then a few years later, we moved to California, where he was at the University of California in Davis. And then that's where I did. Uh, then I just kept going. There was the same thing. There was the school program there for instruments and band and orchestra and all that stuff, and very mixed sort of bag as far as quality goes. But I mean, like I'm sure you had the experience and I had the experience. You find each other. You kind of weirdos who are interested in
Mm-hmm.
traditional instruments, instead of rock and roll or something. You find each other and you get together and you form ensembles, and that actually worked. It was Davis is a nice university community, so I don't want to sound like a snob, but all my friends' parents were also professors of something, and that was the atmosphere there. So
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty conducive.
Did you think you would become a clarinetist, or after like with
I
university you left it aside, or?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I think it's well, no, I was going to say I think it's something everyone has to grapple with, but I mean a lot of I hate to say this, but again, middle class kids, the parents have got bigger ideas for them than to be a musician, and that was certainly the case in my family.
Oh
And
yeah.
I fought against it. I tried not to listen to my parents, but they said, look, just do this for us. Just do an undergraduate degree in what they called at the time liberal arts. Then we'll see about what's going to happen. And this is where I think my story becomes sort of interesting, which is that two things took place when I was a teenager. One was, I think I was 14 or 15, and I one day I woke up and realized that there's no Baroque music for the clarinet. And I found that really, really upsetting, because really that was my favorite music. I listened
Hmm.
mainly to Bach all the time, anything, you know. And so just the realization that I would never play that music was really horrible. So I kind of scouted around. I'm not even sure how this happened, but I started to play the recorder, so I could play with these little recorder groups, and played the Baroque music, and that style, that sound, those harmonies, the form of those pieces. That was the sort of thing I wanted to do. So I put a lot of effort into that. And then because I have a very sweet older sister, and who's very considerate. And one Christmas, she gave me a recording of Franz Bruggen, and I
Hmm.
can still remember listening to this concertos recording that he did, Sammartini and Telemann and Vivaldi and things, and I just was, I was like, first of all, I never heard any recorder sound so beautiful, and second of all, he just had such amazing technique. I was like, as a teenager, like, whoa, I'd like to do that. So that was very inspiring. But I kept with the clarinet, and I was quite serious about the clarinet. I played in
Okay.
the regional youth symphony, and I got a group together and played the Mozart clarinet quintet in high school, and stuff like that. So there was stuff going on, but then when I finished high school, I was a good student and stuff, and I was admitted to Harvard University. So I went from California to Boston, and when I was looking at all the course catalog for all the offerings, I was a book then, nothing was online. Of course, online didn't exist. I saw that semester, a visiting professor in the music department was Franz Bruggen. Just like, whoa! So I went over, and it was incredible. The music department was less than a 5-minute walk from the dormitory I lived in, on the what they called the yard.
Wow.
And I found his door, his name on it. I knocked on the door opened, there he was. It was like all this happened within 15 minutes. It was just sort of
Wow,
this
this is like
miraculous.
fate.
Yeah. It really does seem like it was fate, And I'm sure then I at one point I called my parents and was so excited that I'd met this idol of mine, and I can imagine them. Oh,
Oh
send him
no.
off to university, and what does he do? He still wants to do music. It's pretty funny. But he was there for a semester. He agreed to take me on as a private student, and I went to his seminar that he gave on early music. And I really, then I really started to understand what historical performance was. But I
Yeah.
didn't understand it at all before. But just the way he ran the seminar, and I just sat in a corner. I didn't do it for credit or anything. I couldn't have. It was a graduate seminar, but just sitting in the corner and observing all these older musicians and what they were talking about, and just this, it was somehow miraculous, actually. And for me at that time, that was a real game changer. And yeah, so just also being in Boston, there was this Friedrich von Hune had a workshop there, and there was just a lot of early music activity in the area. So I went to concerts and things, and yeah. So meanwhile, I declared my major as a major in philosophy, and that was interesting. Was a very good department at the time, and interesting people to work with.
Imagine,
So
yeah.
the two things kind of went together. But after, actually even during my 4-year undergraduate, I took what they call a year off, just to go over to Holland to check out the scene in The Hague. I enrolled in The Hague. Bruggen was pretty much slowing down with teaching then. I had a couple lessons with him, but otherwise it was with the other people on the faculty. Ricardo Kanji in particular was one of the recorder teachers, a Brazilian, fantastic player and great musician, good teacher. To be admitted to the conservatory wasn't really a problem. I had to send a tape and stuff, but I think at that time they were kind of letting almost anyone in, because they were just trying to build something up, which they've,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
you've been there, they've done very successfully. It's a very kind of laissez-faire. The even now the level of students is, from amazing to what are they doing here, kind of feeling. But I think that's kind of healthy. It's a little bit of a village. You've got the people who really are responsible and competent, and then you've got the people who are less so. And I think that's sort of sweet. It's not super competitive. It's you can find competitive people if you want to, but I think at the same time there's this kind of feeling you can kind of do what you want.
And it's a sort of a legendary department, and we are of course talking about the conservatory in The Hague. So you went and spent 1 year in The Hague, and then you came back to Boston
Then
to
I came
finish?
back, and
You had
finished
to, or?
I finished my undergraduate
Yeah.
thing. My parents really, really wanted me to do that. And,
Yeah.
I'm sure you appreciate this because you're doing a PhD. It was a very, I thank them now. I didn't thank them at the time, especially, but, I think it's not a bad thing, especially if you have plans. Or I didn't have plans necessarily, but I kind of was interested in the history. I was interested in eventually doing some writing and organizing my thoughts about things. And I think you're better equipped to do that if you've actually done the 4 years. And I had to write a little kind of a thesis, not a dissertation, but still significant work as part of my major. And yeah, it's some academic qualifications are not a bad thing if you're interested in historical performance.
And if you didn't become a musician, do you think you would have pursued in philosophy?
It's a good question. I had sort of anticipated philosophy as a good preparation for studying law. I was thinking I would go to law school. I still think in some ways that the way my mind works, and also just sort of my just my view of society and fairness, and doing the right thing and all that kind of stuff, ethics, I guess you could say. I think I might have enjoyed a career as a lawyer, but not half as much as the joy and the amazement I've had as a musician.
Sure. Yeah, I guess you can be very convincing So I guess you would have had that. So now you're done with your bachelor degree, I assume.
Right.
How did the clarinet became the historical clarinet in your life?
Well, I mean, it was kind of logical, wasn't it? I mean, I
Yes.
went over to The Hague, and I had been studying recorder there, and just to be in the early music department, and then but then just I put two and two together and thought, oh, this is going to go farther. We're all happily toiling away here with the Baroque, but there's no question, Haydn is coming, and Mozart and Beethoven. I mean, I'm sure, like you, a lot of this took place. These thoughts and these developments of interest took place in the canteen at the conservatory, just talking to other people. What do you think? What are your plans? And that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And even if you didn't have the same vision as someone else, it was a kind of trigger to figure things out for yourself. So that was another sort of bizarre coincidence and incredible stroke of luck, that at that time the conservatory had a class in making woodwind instruments. So I got
Uh-huh.
into that. I got into making instruments because that's a big part of playing early instruments, and nobody was making clarinets at the time. So I figured out how to measure them and how to work with wood and make the tubes and all that. And yeah, so that was kind of an important part of it too. You got to have something to play on.
You had no woodwork skills prior to that?
Not really,
Not
just
really.
my father was like, a weekend carpenter kind of guy, and I learned, we had tools and stuff, but not the specific skills required to make a woodwind instrument. No.
So you made your first classical clarinet, I
Yep,
suppose, and then
that
you
seems to
played
be the
it.
right one. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And how was it to play on this instrument?
Well, it was terrible. I mean, it was just a disaster, of course. And when people look at the instruments and they say, "Oh, how do you do this?" I say, "Well, you make a lot of really bad ones." It's like not even close to being in tune or working well. Even though you have reference, I went around and measured instruments in different collections, and slowly, if I had some money and the price was right, I was also buying old instruments. And so then I was just
Mhm.
absolutely fascinated with the whole thing, but it didn't mean that I could make one. And mouthpiece was really, really difficult. That was probably the most difficult thing. And then just making an instrument that played in tune, because it's very, very difficult. It's not just copying, um, and even if you, first of all, you have to, it's very rare that you find an original that really plays absolutely in tune and
Mhm.
evenly and everything, because they're a couple hundred years old, so they're not in very good condition. Also, you could
Yeah.
argue that at the time, instrumentalists played on new instruments. They didn't play on instruments that were 200 years old when it comes to woodwinds. So that's also a factor, because a new instrument really does play differently from an old one.
Yeah, and you never know in which conditions the ones in museums were kept. So
Exactly. So it was just kind of averaging things out, I think, basically, and realizing just probably, I think, if anybody asked me what's the really hardest thing to do and what's the most critical thing to do, it's the shape of the holes. We
Mhm.
all know that there's something called undercutting, that the holes open as they go into the bore, but just how much you do that and in sort of what shape, that that's the whole thing. That makes the quality of the sound, and it makes the intonation, because
Mhm.
so many holes have multiple functions. And if,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I mean, they could work really well for one note, but then in the lower octave they don't work at all, or the other way
Mhm.
around. And then you might get, for example, fork F, which is also B flat, is often a little bit of a disaster, but there's a way to get that better than it could be. But then, does that really work for a high D, for example? This is real clarinet talk, but that hole, that second hole in the right hand is very hard to get right.
Yeah.
And that's something, you just have to experiment with. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's not really entirely chance. I think once you do it a lot, once
Mhm.
as I said before, you have to make a lot of bad instruments, and then one day you go, oh, instead of having 25 problems, this clarinet has about 5 problems. That's
Yay.
considered progress.
Yeah. And we should also underline that each and every single instrument, even from the same maker, are different. Like you
Absolutely.
have different fingerings for your A clarinet, your 6-keyed A clarinet, your 12-keyed A clarinet, your C
Right.
clarinet. It's always different.
They're instruments that I've made, and I try to, have a line in it in terms of how they work and how they're tuned and so on. It's still, I don't know about you, like, Beethoven 9 is a good example of an absolute nightmare because you have to play C, B flat, and A clarinets, and they all have slightly different fingerings to really play in tune. So it's not a question of, the notes coming out. The notes will come out. That's not a problem. But, just those little tiny variations in pitch are so important. Like in the slow movement, you've got to get the interval just in the right spot. And oboists have the same thing when they play Matthew Passion, for example, with oboe d'amore, and oboe da caccia.
But it made me think also of the ending of Don Giovanni, when you like the second clarinet has to do all the Alberti basses, and you need to switch like super fast between I think C or B flat and A, and the A you didn't play it for like almost the whole act, and this is super flat. This is a nightmare every time. So if we go back just to the timeline, you went back to finish your degree. And then you decided to go to The Hague to like really.
I went straight to The Hague and didn't come back.
Okay, yeah, for like decades.
Yeah, well, I mean, just on a personal note, I went to The Hague and realized I'd probably enjoy life more if I lived in Amsterdam. So I moved to Amsterdam, and the rest of the time I stayed in Holland. I lived in Amsterdam, and it was, if you count all the years up, I think it's almost 30 years that I lived there.
So you're fluent in Dutch, of course.
Well, it's not bad. It's not great.
It's not bad. Okay, cool. And I was wondering, we talked a bit about the clarinet building, and now I understand more how it happened. But you were also one of the first, if not the first, maybe correct me, to record and perform the Mozart clarinet concerto on the basset clarinet. So how did you end up building this instrument and performing this?
The Riga thing hadn't been discovered yet, so that was. And then I realized that there were two choices. You could just make a long clarinet with a bell, and which is probably, I think, what they made first. That when this apparently Stadler and Lotz worked together, and I think probably the instrument that Lotz made first. I even wonder if it had the funny bell. I think it might have even had a normal bell. It's possible, and it was diatonic. I think it was just a B flat clarinet, like what you need to play Clemenza di Tito, and then the instrument in A obviously was chromatic, and then obviously had this special bell on it. We know that from the Riga programs. So at the time, though, all we really had was that Bertusch description in the Journal for Luxury and Fashion, Luxus und der Moden, and he just said that the clarinet, like 2/3 of I can't remember exactly, last quarter, there's a cross pipe and brought on to the instrument, and so that made me feel like it probably looked like a basset horn of the time, with the box. So I made an instrument with the box and the brass bell and everything in A. I just scaled it up. So I just guessed what it should be like, and that's what I did that first recording on. For some reason, they didn't include a photograph of the instrument, but in fact, just to say that honestly, the very first person to do it on a period instrument, a boxwood instrument, was Hans Deinzer.
Okay.
And he made a recording with Collegium Marium, and Rudolf Tutz made the instrument, and that's just a longer tube with a regular bell. And then around the same time that I did it, Anthony Pay in Britain also recorded it with the Academy of Ancient Music. So so Deinzer was definitely first by a year or 2 or 3 actually, and then Tony Pay and I were about the same time. He had the regular one with the bell. I had the basset horn one. We were both wrong, it turns out. But there's more to it than just the shape of the instrument, and the excitement, of course, is playing, and the difficulty is playing on an instrument with no extra keys. So that was a challenge.
And how is the feeling of playing on this A basset horn? Is it like a bass horn?
Yeah, as you'd expect, if you know, because I know you play the bass horn, the period bass horn. It's got a similar kind of resistance.
Okay.
You kind of have to sit down really to play it. I mean, I made it straight instead of curved.
Oh, okay.
So that made a difference. Uh, yeah, I mean, it had some interesting qualities, but I'm absolutely sure it was not anything like what Stadler ever played.
Mm-hmm.
So it got but the notes were there. I mean, with the box, you had the extra length, you know.
Yeah.
That made it possible to play all the low notes. So that was pretty exciting.
That's the important thing, I guess. And how many years after that did the Riga program came up? Because you built a clarinet with the D'Amore ball later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I can pretty, yeah, I think I finished this was all 1985. I know that for sure. I think the Riga program, that Pamela Poulin discovered it in 89.
Okay.
So I'm not 100% sure when I got it and when I actually managed to make the first one, but I knew her already, and so I'm pretty sure that I made the first one just because I knew her, and she sent the thing to me and told me not to show it to anyone.
Okay,
so,
well,
because she wanted to publish. Of course, this was a big find, and I respect that. I mean, it's not. It was incredibly nice of her to share it with me. But I think it kind of played into her her vision of how to introduce this by having someone make a replica of that shape, and then when I made it, it was so much better. It was so good with this bell. I mean, the sound of the low notes and everything. It was like, oh, of course, that makes perfect sense. And then you start looking around and you realize, oh, actually, several other makers, Viennese makers as well as makers in Germany, also made these instruments with the bell, with the bulbous bell. So it wasn't. It was maybe not from in Mozart's time, but this idea had to come from somewhere. And so in addition to coming from, obviously, from the D'Amore, the oboe D'Amore, for example, that shape, it came, down from other makers well into the 19th century.
Well, that's really fascinating. You are one of the founding members of the Orchestra of the 18th century. And could you explain to me a bit, how did the orchestra start, and like what was the initial vision of the orchestra?
I think it was just 100% Franz Bruggen, who at that time had a hugely successful career as a recorder player, and he said I think he was in his early 40s, and he just thought, when I'm 60, do I want to be sitting around playing these little whistles? And I think that was sort of a joke, but I think what he meant to say was he felt he had something more to say than just what was allowed on the recorder, and he had got a vision to start an orchestra. So basically, he just asked people that he knew and that he thought would work well together and that he would get along with. And because I was lucky enough to have met him already, years before, he knew me, and when it was time to add clarinets to the orchestra, which was pretty early on, it was the second tour. In fact, we did Mozart G minor version with clarinets, and yeah, and then from then on, I think that was 1982, 1983, something like that.
Wow,
and
this
from
is
then on,
like
they did Baroque programs, and they still do Baroque programs, but for the most part, there were Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, the big Viennese school. Well, it started just with him deciding, well, I've worked here with those. He wanted an international group. He didn't want a Dutch group, and so he just had an idea of the people that he thought would be interesting and good to work with.
Yeah.
So it was there were no auditions or anything.
No, okay. Only out of friendship and respect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. And how was it for you to work in the field where, especially for the clarinet, I mean, there was really no precedent. Like like you had to create your own tracks.
Yeah, I never really thought about it. I think if I look back on it, I think I had the freedom not to have to think about it. I didn't have to
Hmm.
follow a tradition or, do things a certain way because somebody was telling me you had to do it that way. I that I think at that time the whole vision of how 18th century music should be played was a learning process, and then I think when you listen to a Kauken play, or you listen to obviously Franz Bruggen, or you listen to the British, even though I think that I say even because even though there's a difference in, I think quite a difference in style and approach, there's still certain things that are important. Articulation is very, very important. Smaller phrasing, and having the faith that this will add up to a bigger statement instead of one long line, which is what most modern players want to create.
Hmm.
This unbelievable appreciation for color on the instruments. Again, with the clarinet, we work so hard on the modern clarinet to play just incredibly evenly, that the quality of this note is matches the quality of the other notes in the scale. I mean, that's in 18th century music, that doesn't matter at all. It's almost the contrary. The more colorful, the more difference there is, the better. And
Hmm.
so when you embrace that and you have that, then I think it makes a big difference, and it really adds up to a completely different vision.
Yeah. And what would you say, in retrospect, so far, what was the biggest challenge you encountered in your career?
Um, well, I think I think that maybe just the challenges that any musician would have is just to always to try and play the best you can and not ever really be all that satisfied with it, and keep
Mm.
keep trying. I mean, I think I speak for everybody who plays a reed instrument by saying that reeds are that's really that you need to spend a lot of time with reeds, and learn to figure out all the parameters, how they're going to behave in certain circumstances, and what you can do to be in control of that. Because, I mean, we all know the wonder of playing with a good reed. And we
Yeah,
all know the absolute
definitely.
hell of having a reed that you thought that was going to be okay, and it turns out not to be, and then you don't really seem to have any others. And
Yeah.
that's not a nice situation to be in. So that's very challenging to
Hmm.
maintain that, to be on top of it. I mean, I have an absurd number of read cases, and I just it's very hard for me to even stay in control of, like, oh, so that's that one. I have to get to know them often. I discover suddenly I'll discover like a large box that I have no idea what they are. I mean, I can see who made them, which maker they are, but
Yeah.
I have no idea if they're old or they're new, or are they hard, or yeah, it's really funny. I try to stay on top of it, but I think it's hard. But I mean, it's better to have too many than not enough.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a bit the same as you. I'm a hoarder for reeds.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking, you built your instruments, but you prefer to buy reeds. You don't make your own
No,
reeds.
I mean,
What?
I did try. I did try to make reeds from scratch, and I kind of I had that moment, which I think you have, like with instruments. I had a moment, and I thought, I can do this. Okay, this is garbage. This is completely hopeless. But if I do this, and this, then I'll get there. When I made reeds from scratch, I sort of had a glimmer of what I would have to do to go the next step, and then how many
Hmm.
steps there would be after that, which would be quite a few. And I just thought, oh, it's already to have a really busy, um, you know, um, life
Yeah.
with teaching, with touring, and all those sorts of things. And I ended up just stopping making. I just didn't have time to make instruments. That was another good thing about the pandemic, because I had time again suddenly. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, you just if you can cut something out and give yourself a little more time, then
Yeah.
it's worth doing.
Sure. I agree. I don't make my reeds either. Are there historical evidence that players in the 18th century or the 19th century were making their own reeds, or they were also buying them from makers?
Well, there are. One thing comes to mind right away, which is this. I can't remember. It's an article in the Allgemeine Musikalischen Zeitung, where the guy's talking about you've really got to stop playing with the reed on top and turn the mouthpiece around and play with the reed on the bottom. That's the big takeaway from that article.
Isn't it the
But he talks.
Michaelis one?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's the one. Okay.
exactly. And I don't know if you remember, but at the end, he talks about his instrument and who made his instrument, and that he said, and it's really important to have a good reed.
One good
Like
reed.
one good reed, he said. And sometimes, you maybe have some problems and you might want another one. So when I got my instrument, I asked for 10 extra reeds, I think is what he says, something like that.
Oh, okay. So it came with the instrument.
Yeah, so that and he recommended that. He said that generally speaking, you can get the good reeds from the maker, and it's probably best because that guy made the mouthpiece, right?
Yeah, so
reeds that are suited to the mouthpiece. So, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced that too. I've talked to people, and I guess I have my own opinion too. That if somebody makes a mouthpiece, they test it and create the whole ease of playing, or the thing works on the basis of a certain type of reed.
yeah.
So that can be Van Dorn, it could be Gonzalez, it could be PL. There are a few choices. Rico, German cut, all these things. For us, I think generally speaking, German cut seems to be the best. Yeah, so that's where you sort of start. But yeah, so you almost choose your mouthpiece according to whether or not the maker likes the reeds that you like. that could be a consideration. Usually it's the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Back to my career questions. I wanted to ask, of course, the opposite. What was your favorite moment or your most cherished accomplishment during your career?
I'm really not one of these people who looks back. I never listen to my recordings or anything. I kind of like what's the next one? I don't know what it is. I think probably it's something it would make me too depressed. I think it would make me too depressed.
Okay.
So I tend not to. I don't. But there've just been so many. I mean, so many of the concerts with the orchestra of the 18th century. Maybe the first time I wasn't so nervous that I could actually really enjoy playing the Mozart concerto with an orchestra. I feel incredibly fortunate that I've had opportunities to play with musicians that I've really liked and I got along with, and that we could just play concerts that were, I don't want to say effortless, but effortless from the point of view of getting along, and then you do your best to rise to the highest level you can. So yeah, it's been just full of great moments.
But I also think the publication of your book was a good one.
Yeah. That was pretty exciting, yeah, to see it.
That's a big thing for any person interested in clarinet history. This is the book. This is, in my opinion, the most comprehensive one. So an essential in any clarinet library. I was wondering, what is the best advice you received?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a very good question. Yeah.
And maybe like an advice that you would like to share with like younger generations, or like anybody who's interested in this field.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should. You'd think that one thing would just stick out, but.
Or maybe before, I can ask you, how do you think the like general early music milieu and the community will evolve?
Well, let me answer your first question.
Okay.
I think one thing, and this will sound to anybody listening to this will sound maybe like A, ridiculous, and B, how could you choose that as being so important? But I can remember working with someone who said to me, and this was a long time ago. He said, I don't. It wasn't me, but somebody in the ensemble was saying something like, "Well, there's piano. Mozart writes piano there, or something like that." And this guy said, "But piano doesn't mean soft." And I remember thinking, I mean, like everybody, you
What do you
learn
mean?
that piano means soft,
Yeah.
but then he said, no, it's he wants a different kind of effect there, and then that led on to him pointing out that you go through every piece of music that Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven ever wrote, and you look at the most important moment for the clarinet in every symphony, for instance, they always write piano, always. And that is not because they want you to play soft. If you played soft at those moments, it might work, but generally speaking, the chances are what he's trying to tell you is this is special. This has got to have some quality to it that is different and enhances the music somehow. This you need to concentrate on. And forte is just tutti. In fact, I don't know about you, but if you're playing Beethoven 9 and you have to get all the way through that, and you have unbelievably sensitive things to play in the slow movement, for example, which comes right after that scherzo that is unrelenting, you can have the best reed in the world, but it's not really going to hold up that well if you hammer away in the scherzo. But everybody's hammering away in the scherzo. You don't really have to play that loud in the scherzo. Don't feel you have to play every note, and don't feel that you have to play forte the whole time, whatever forte means in this instance. Forte means tutti, piano means delicate, dolce, solo. And I think that was that sort of beginning of that kind of thinking thought process. That was extremely important for me. And I, you know, when I teach, I'm sure I said this kind of thing to you before too. When I teach,
Sure.
I say, you know, it's like it's so depressing when you work with a group that is, when it says forte, they just suddenly play louder, and when it says piano, they just suddenly play softer, but they don't get why. That really is important to think about. That isn't just
Colors.
a question of decibels, you know, that it's a question
Yeah.
of music and effect. So I mean, I'm not pretending to have the answer, but I am pretending to have the question, which is that what does the composer mean by that? Not just
Yeah.
it says piano here, so let's play soft. It doesn't work like, it's not that simple.
Yeah, food for thought, for sure. And yeah, where do you think we're going? What's the future of early music?
I hope that the future of all music and all arts is just more and better, in the sense that it's engaging for people. I think the public is very critical, and they've had a lot of time with not going to live music events. And some people think that means it's over. I completely disagree. I think that means there's a real hunger, actually, to be in a room with somebody doing something creative. So we have a big responsibility to make it engaging and to do it better than we've ever done it. And I think we have the chance to do that too. We've had all this time to think things over and to prepare and to rest and reflect. And so I feel very optimistic about it.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to let me interview you. It was a real treat for me to trap you in a Zoom meeting and answer you all the questions I wanted.
It's a pleasure to talk to you and think about these things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Take care, Maurice. Ciao.
Here is the end of our long journey together. I hope this interview was inspiring and useful to you. If you like the content of this series, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. See you soon in another episode of Clarinet Stories.